Welcome back to the Gyrl podcast. I'm Kyra. All right, let's welcome Benjy to the show. Welcome, Benjy.
Hi, Kyra. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yes. Well, let's get started by having you tell the audience listening or watching out there who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, my name is Benjy Sherer. I am a mental health coach, or I actually kind of prefer the term emotional fitness trainer. And I give my clients basically the skills and tools that decades of therapy often never gave them, show them how to process emotions without needing to analyze them, without needing to go on what I call, the trauma hunting escapade, where we're searching for where this all came from in the past. Because we understand that the body is always trying to help us heal. And so long as we can learn how to feel safe in all of our emotional experiences and in our heart and our minds and our bodies, then we can kind of create what I like to refer to as an emotional calorie deficit. The same way as it goes with physical training. If you take on more calories than you expend, then you put on weight. Same with your emotions. If you're not processing your emotions and you're kind of piling more emotions onto the pile than you're processing over a given day, then it builds up and it builds up and it builds up and you lose track of who you are and you build up all of these defense mechanisms. So I show people how to feel safe in their emotional experiences so that their body can start releasing more and more of what they've been holding on to, as opposed to adding more trauma to the pile every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Well, why don't we get started with talking about what is emotional fitness training?
Yeah. So, as I was saying, at its core, emotional fitness training is about bypassing this analysis and basically developing the skills and the muscles that we need to properly process the unresolved emotions. So, it really focuses around kind of two subconscious cycles that have been going on underneath the surface that most people have never stopped to realize. The first one is, as I was just referring to, is this kind of emotional avoidance pattern where throughout our lives we experience a lot of uncomfortable emotional experiences. And for a bunch of reasons, we don't tend to feel safe purging and processing them in the moment. For one thing, because throughout our lives, we tend to even get judged and rejected and mocked or abused or dumped for processing our emotions. The body has natural ways of dealing with these things, crying, screaming, shaking, laughing. And the more that we express ourselves throughout our lives, often that gets us judged and that gets us into trouble. So we start building up this idea in our minds that, wait a minute, not only did that initial emotional experience hurt, but the very natural thing that my body wanted to do to process those emotions led to more pain. So we start building up defense mechanisms around the natural things that our body is trying to do to help us heal. And that starts creating an ongoing problem. And we basically develop our entire personalities around the defense mechanisms that we use to keep ourselves safe without realizing that we're doing it. So the simplest example that I like to give is sarcasm. And no hate to anyone out there who uses a lot of sarcasm, but most people don't realize that they're doing it as a defense mechanism. I see this a lot on dating sites. I'm still single. I'm on the dating sites, and I see a lot of people who are like, hey, if you can't handle my sarcasm, then you can't handle me. And that's all well and good, but do you not realize that sarcasm is a way of keeping people at arm's length? It's a way of saying something that's true and pretending it's not true, or saying something that isn't true with this sarcastic hint of maybe it is true behind it, because you're not fully willing to be fully honest in that moment. So that's just one example of a personality trait that we develop, which is in fact a defense mechanism that we don't realize we're using as a defense mechanism. So as a way of avoiding uncomfortable emotions, we build up our entire personality around these patterns and habits that we use to keep ourselves safe. And that leads to piling on the emotional calories, because on a day-to-day basis, we're not properly expressing ourselves, we're not properly purging, and we develop even this fear of our emotions, which leads to this really problematic thing where, look, at the core of a lot of our emotional struggles is fear. When we're in fear, that's what causes anxiety, it's what causes a lot of the depression. And the real issue is that we're afraid of something that we can't run from. We're afraid of our emotions. So I like to express to people, it's very much like imagine you were afraid of your shadow. If you were
Mhm.
literally afraid of your shadow, you would be in fear every moment of every day because you
Mhm.
literally can't run from it. The
Right.
only way to escape your shadow is to sit in the dark all day long. And the
Mhm.
same goes with your emotions. If you're afraid of your emotions, then you'll be in fear every moment of every day. The only way to not be afraid is to shut down your emotions. So people get into that habit where we're avoiding our emotions. Avoiding our emotions leads to defense mechanisms. Abiding by those defense mechanisms leads to more problems in our lives because we're projecting our anger and our fear and our frustration onto other people. And then that creates what I like to call the anger game, where someone says something that triggers me and I become defensive and I become aggressive. So I say
Mhm.
something that triggers them. So they become defensive and they become aggressive and they say something that triggers me, and back and forth, all because neither of
Mhm.
us knows how to process our emotions. So
Oh.
that's the first subconscious
Yeah.
cycle. And
Yeah.
then the second one has to do with the three elements of our experience of reality, which is again
Mhm.
just something most people have never stopped to realize. But
Mhm.
every moment of every day, there are three things that you experience: thoughts, emotions, sensations. That's
Mhm.
all that we can experience. Every moment, anything that you experience falls into one of those categories: thoughts, what's going on in your head; sensations, your experience of your body and the external world; and
Mhm.
emotions, which is this intangible thing that's a little hard to pinpoint, but is basically the mood, the lens through which you're interpreting whatever it is that
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
experiencing at the moment.
Mhm.
And what people don't realize is firstly that those are three completely separate experiences. It's like sight, sound, or like light, sound, and smell. They're three
Mhm.
completely different things. They're just
Right.
not of the same nature. And they manipulate each other
Mhm.
over and over and over in this ongoing circle. So a lot of people talk, for example, about how your thoughts affect your emotions. Okay, you want to speak positively, you want to practice your affirmations, you want to have gratitude because negative thoughts are going to create negative emotions. And yes, there is truth to that. But not enough people talk about how your emotions manipulate your thoughts. When you happen to be feeling happy, you think more optimistically. When you happen to be feeling sad, you think more pessimistically. And they're constantly manipulating each other in this back and forth,
Mhm.
along with what's going on in your body. The stress response in your body, when you're not breathing properly, when you're tensing up your shoulders, when you're clenching your jaw, that's your
Mhm.
body sending a message to you and your subconscious mind that you're in danger. And when your body thinks that you're in danger, well, that creates more uncomfortable emotions and it creates more cycling negative thoughts. And
Mhm.
those three elements of your experience are manipulating each other in this constant ongoing feedback loop. And most people don't recognize it. And we experience all of them as a jumbled mess, all of them hitting you at once.
Mhm.
And if we don't learn how to isolate and handle each one of those experiences as their own thing, then that cycle keeps on going and going and going and going and
Mhm.
going. So someone triggers you, and that creates a stress response in your body. And the stress response
Mhm.
creates fear. And the fear has you thinking a certain way. And then thinking those negative thoughts tells you that you're in danger, which creates more of the stress response in your body. And the stress response in your body creates more fear and more anger. And the fear and the anger
Yes.
creates more thoughts. And around and around and around we go. So
Yes.
emotional fitness training is about giving people the skills and the tools, firstly, the muscles, the emotional muscles, to
Mhm.
confront those uncomfortable emotions that they've been avoiding confronting the whole time
Mhm.
without needing to analyze or understand them. It doesn't matter, at least not at the beginning. Just give you the muscles to confront those and feel safe doing it, and give you the skills and tools of how to handle your thoughts as their own thing, how to handle your
Mhm.
emotions as their own thing, how to handle your sensations as their own thing, so that you
Mhm.
can escape that subconscious cycle and let your body go through the healing process that it's been trying to go through this whole time.
Mhm. Yes. Okay. First of all, Benji, you were dropping lots of nuggets there. So I just want to thank
Yeah.
you for that. But it is so true. Like it just is like these things are like vicious cycles that people are going through, especially because I will admit I used to when I was younger, sarcasm was like my go-to tool. I mean, it's like, of course, this is how I'm gonna handle you. But I will also agree that, really being able to work through the why. Why am I using that as a defense mechanism? What Benji's saying is very true, everyone. So if you're someone out there, and yes, it's totally fine to be like sarcastic sometimes, but when your sarcasm is a defense mechanism, like it's not helping you, it's not helping people that you interact with, it's not helping you to heal if you are using it in that sense. So totally agree with that. And I love that just the breakout of understanding, the two different parts of it, because I think a lot of times we don't probably think of, most times when we're dealing with emotions, it is that, oh, let's go back to where that came from. Did that happen? Did something happen as a child? And then you're trying to you're trying to like figure it out. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because I think whatever works for you is what you should do, because I do traditional therapy, so I have had moments of talking about maybe what triggered me, so I've had those moments. But I do think it's important, too, to be able to figure out how to deal with something, in the moment. Like it doesn't have to necessarily go back to a time when you were 10 or a time when you were 15 or whatever, but being able, because guess what? Life happens in the real. And it's happening so fast these days that I think people need tools that can help them to deal with how they feel, their thoughts in a moment. I'm an example. We're talking on a Monday morning. A lot of people going back to work on a Monday. A lot of people could go immediately be triggered by something. Okay, all of my people out there on Teams, all my people on Slack, you could hear a sound, something that just triggers you immediately from work. And you're trying to, and it's like in the moment, you need the tools right now to deal with what is happening to you right now. Not like thinking back 10 years ago that it was at that first job I had and they used Teams and then this happened. But so I think that's really important. And I think this is why what you do really matters and is important to help people on their journeys, especially like where they are right now.
No. Well, thank you, Kyra. So I like, even when it comes to understanding why we're using certain defense mechanisms, why we're doing this, I do think to some extent it's important to understand why, but I think we need to get to a deeper level of why. The deeper level is, and I was just talking with my clients about this on a Q&A, like we're trying to learn the why at a formless level. We're trying to see past the superficial, what happened, in the external world, and see more towards what happened inside. So the why isn't necessarily like, we might think the why of why I use sarcasm is because my mom, treated me like this and my dad didn't make me feel safe expressing my emotions. And those things are true. Absolutely. We're not trying to pretend like they're not true.
Yeah.
But there's that superficial level of why versus the formless version of why, which is because I have unresolved emotions from those things. That's the deeper level. When we can understand just the core of the real reason why isn't because my mom or my dad did this. The real reason why is because I'm holding on to emotions from when my mom or dad did this. And then we can even remove that second half of the sentence of from when my mom and dad did this. It's just because I'm holding on to emotions.
Yes.
That's it. And when we can see through the form of the thing that happened and see into, oh, wait a minute, I'm holding on to emotions. Because when we try and analyze, like when we try and connect with the emotions, it's not about analysis. Fear isn't actually about something. It's just fear. Fear is triggered by something, but fear is its own emotion. Anger is its own emotion. Sadness. You're not necessarily sad about this thing. You are sad. And the sadness was triggered by this. Absolutely. There is this connection, as I said, where these three elements manipulate each other. But we want to see past the superficial form of this thing that happened and that thing that happened and see down to the core of, oh, right, I'm holding on to emotions and I'm scared of them and it feels uncomfortable and it feels like a threat when I process them. And now that I can see that and I can understand that, if I can practice showing my body that I am safe when these emotions try and come up, then I can finally purge and process what's happening.
Yes, I love that. Why do you think, in some cases, traditional therapy isn't as effective for some people as, they'd like for it to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, for one thing, like I don't like to trash on other people's approaches overall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think there are a few reasons why traditional talk therapy doesn't tend to get us the ultimate results that we're looking for. First reason is, look, let's just be on, not every therapist out there is the best therapist ever. And I cannot tell you how many times I get on the phone with people and they tell me they've been doing therapy for 20 years. And I
Mm-hmm.
ask them, okay, so during that time, what skills and tools have you gotten of how to handle your issues? And they tell me none. They've been going in there and talking about their problems over and over and over for 20 years, but all they've been doing is analyzing the pain and the trauma, or all they've been doing is talking or venting. They have this place once a week where they can go and
Mm-hmm.
feel safe just saying what's on their mind, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
our goal is to make you feel safe in your life, not just
Mm-hmm.
in this session once a week, where you just get to go and vent. I don't think that that's really ultimately helpful of where we're going. Then there's also fact, look, as I was saying, there's this cycle going on between thoughts, emotions, sensations, thoughts, emotions, sensations. And in talk therapy, we are kind of actively perpetuating that cycle because we're trying to feel our emotions. And then when we feel our emotions, we're actively going to, where do you think that came from? And what do you think is happening? We're actively turning our emotions into thoughts, but we're never going to heal our emotions by analyzing them. I like to express it this way. Like if you went to a doctor with a headache
Mm-hmm.
and the doctor explained to you why you had a headache, would that make the pain go away?
No.
No, of course not. So if we understand that knowing the source of your headache won't make the physical pain go away, why do we think that understanding the source of your emotional pain will make the pain go away?
Mm-hmm.
And not only does it not make the pain go away, but like I said, it perpetuates that cycle where now you're turning your emotions into thoughts. And what you're actually doing in that moment is you're justifying your emotions. You're justifying those defense mechanisms because of this thing that happened and that thing that happened and that thing that happened. And look, are your emotions justified? Absolutely. Are
Mm-hmm.
your defense mechanisms justified? Absolutely. You did go through these things. A lot of people have gone through immense trauma, and even people who didn't go through the worst of the worst trauma, we're all carrying trauma inside of us. We've all
Mm-hmm.
gone through these things. Yes, your emotions are justified in that moral, ethical, historical, analytic kind of way. But the question is, do you want to justify your emotions or do you want to overcome them? And the
Mm-hmm.
more that you justify them, the more that you're telling yourself over and over and over, well, my dad did this to me, so it makes perfect sense why I respond this way. And yes, that's true. But it's not helpful, I think, ultimately to overcoming
Mm-hmm.
it. I think people do sometimes get some good benefits or some good results from talk therapy, but it's not from the talking and the analyzing. I think the best results come in talk therapy from the moments when you finally feel safe enough to cry and let something out. When, because you're talking about and because you feel safe in that environment, you break the barriers to the emotions and you finally let something out. And I just don't think that the talking about it is the most efficient way to make that happen. Because as I mentioned, your body is trying to help you heal all the time. Your body is trying to release these things. And oftentimes the talking about it, the analyzing, the focusing on the past, the justifying of your emotions actually makes it a really roundabout way of trying to release those emotions. It can get you there, but there's a much more direct route to letting your
Mm-hmm.
body release these things when we get the analysis out of the way.
Like it. That's very interesting. Benji, let's talk about what's happening to us when we get triggered.
Yeah. So I think even just the term triggered is an interesting
Mm-hmm.
indication of what's going on here. Because if we take the idea of a gun and a trigger, it's not the trigger that hurts you, it's the
Mm-hmm.
bullet that hurts you. The
Mm-hmm.
trigger is just what sets this whole thing in motion.
Mm-hmm.
So, my perspective of what's happening when you're getting triggered is, look, as we talked about, there's all sorts of unresolved emotions that are stuck
Mm-hmm.
inside of you. And the trigger is simply something that resonates with that unresolved emotion inside of you that's bringing
Mm-hmm.
it up to the surface. So it's like, I don't know if you're musical at all, but if you know like a tuning fork, if you have a
Mm-hmm.
tuning fork, two tuning forks that are tuned to the same frequency, and you tap one and it starts vibrating and you bring it close to the other, that one starts vibrating also, even if they don't touch. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what's happening when you're getting triggered. There's this pool of unresolved emotions inside of you, unresolved emotions of fear and feeling judged and guilt and shame and anger and all of these things that you never dealt with and you never purged. And the trigger is something in your life that resonates with that unresolved emotion trapped inside of you. And the trigger is just reminding you of all of that unresolved pain. So it's like in a moment of trauma, in a moment when you're not dealing with your emotions properly, it's like your head says to your heart, okay, we're not safe right now. So hold on to this pain, and I'm going to come back around and deal with it later when we're safe. Heart goes,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'll remind you about me later. You promise, I trust you. So then we're going through our lives and something triggers us. Something brings up that feeling of feeling insecure, of feeling unsafe, of feeling judged, of feeling mocked, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then your heart goes, hi, here I am. This is the emotion. You promised me that you were going to deal with me when you were safe. Are you safe? Are you ready to deal with me? So
Mm-hmm.
the real irony here, and this is what I was talking about with a more direct route of purging unresolved emotions, is that when you're getting triggered, that's your opportunity to heal. That's the buried stuff, which is very hard to deal with when it's buried,
Mm-hmm.
coming up to the surface and saying, hi, here I am. I know it's uncomfortable, but
Right.
you promised me that you were going to deal with me when you were safe. And if you can learn how to feel safe in the moment when you are getting triggered, then you can finally respond to your body and say, yes, in fact, I am safe right now. And this uncomfortable emotion that's trying to move through me, it's okay. You can let it move through me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And as we develop the skills and the tools and the muscles to handle heavier and heavier triggers, then every trigger becomes a healing opportunity. Someone
Mm-hmm.
says something that offends you, someone says something that crosses your boundary, and instead of resisting that uncomfortable emotion and projecting it back out onto the other person through this defense mechanism, you can actively feel inside into what that discomfort feels like. And
Mm-hmm.
when you learn how to turn inwards into that discomfort, you start realizing that that's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's uncomfortable, but it's not a threat.
Yeah.
And this was a big thing for me with anxiety in particular, like that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach or that tightness in your
Mm-hmm.
chest or the lump in your throat that you get with anxiety. I remember there came a point where I had already dealt with my thoughts enough that like I wasn't believing the narrative that was going on in my head. I was
Mm-hmm.
still having negative thoughts, but they weren't fooling me. I knew how to handle my thoughts as their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the emotions, I was still having some fear. I was still having some low days. But again, I didn't believe it. I didn't think that it meant anything. I knew how to experience my emotions as their own thing. And I was still having some anxiety. So there was that turning feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I remember the first time that I like focused in on that turning feeling. I like to express it as like, imagine, like most of the time when you eat, you just eat. You just scarf down your food. You're not really paying too much attention to it. But imagine that you go to the most expensive restaurant that you're ever going to eat at. This
Mm-hmm.
once in a lifetime kind of chef, and you're eating at that place and it's, $1,000 a plate. Now it's like, everyone shut up. I want to experience this food. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to talk. I don't want to focus. I want to really get every last bit out of this
Right. Yeah.
sensation. And when you can turn your attention to that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach with that same mentality of I'm not afraid of it, I'm not worried about it, I'm not thinking about it. I just want to focus on that feeling. I want to really get what this sensation feels like. I
Mm-hmm.
remember the first time I did that and I turned my attention to it directly without the thoughts and without the fear getting in the way, really focused on that turning feeling in the pit of my stomach and realized, oh, huh, that's all it is. It's a
Mm-hmm.
turning feeling in my stomach. It's uncomfortable, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a threat. I'm fine. I'm okay. And by focusing on it directly without the thoughts getting in the way and without the emotions getting in the way, my body was finally able to work through that discomfort
Mm-hmm.
and finally start letting it go.
Also, so first of all, I have to say, I love your examples. You have the best. It's so like real, and they're just so relatable. So I really appreciate that, and I think people will as well. But there's something that you said even earlier that just is continuing to like resonate in my brain for people is that, when you don't deal with unresolved feelings or emotions, it's like when your heart is saying, "Hi, I'm here." You said you were going to deal with it when, like when things are better. And I feel like people always do that. Like it's like people live in life and it's like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm gonna deal with that. Like as soon as everything else gets better, as soon as this happens, and it's like, when do you decide to deal with it now? And I think a lot of your examples and a lot of the information you're giving us is it tools are really helping people, will help set people up for success so that they can live in the moment, because I think so many people are not like fully living life because they are constantly saying, I'll deal with that later. I know that bothers me. I know that makes me feel uncomfortable, but I mean, a month from now it's going to be better. And guess what? A month from now life is still going to life, and you're still going to be saying the same thing, and your heart's still going to be waving. I don't know, I can visually see that, like waving up at you going, "Hi, I'm here. Like, come on, help me heal."
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so I like that. Okay, let's talk. Tell me about the one core principle that you believe people need to learn to live powerful and authentic lives.
So I think what this all comes down to is fear.
Mhm.
That as I was saying, we're afraid every moment of every day of our emotions. And all of our defense mechanisms, all of these patterns come from fear. And, it's interesting that you were talking a moment ago about how, like, people will constantly put this off. Well, next month I'll deal with it. Next month I'll deal with it. But I like how you said it, life will always life. And it's like we're waiting for everything in our life to settle down for us to finally confront the emotions that are inside and finally do that inner work. But like one of the core principles that people talk about in this healing space, in the spiritual space, is that it's your emotions, it's your limiting beliefs, it's all of these things that are going to get in the way of you ever accomplishing those external things.
Mhm.
So if you're waiting until your external life is settled for you to finally deal with the internal life.
Mhm.
But the truth of the matter is that if you ever want your external life to be settled, you got to deal with what's going on first. You're going to have to face that discomfort. You're going to have to put your emotional healing as the priority first. And people are so afraid both of confronting their emotions and so afraid of all of these things about the external world that we never get around to doing it.
Mhm.
And all of this healing, I think it really comes down to, I'd say, two core principles. One is learning how to feel safe. That's it. Because it doesn't necessarily matter so much what's happening in your external world. I mean, look, there are extremes to this. And yes, we live in a current weird dystopian kind of world. There are real problems in our external world to deal with. But at the end of the day, it's not so much about what's happening outside. It's if you feel safe internally, then everything is okay. And I can prove that, like, there's a very simple example that I like to use, which is, let's say I could offer you one of two options. Option A is you will have infinite money for the rest of your life. You can do absolutely whatever you want, infinite money, but in exchange, you will necessarily be miserable and angry and afraid every single moment until the day you die. Or option B is you will be broke. You will never have more than $10 at a time. But in exchange, you will always feel safe and happy and peaceful and comfortable. The obvious choice is option B, meaning
Right.
that the external thing is not really what we want. It's the internal emotional experience that we want. So when you can feel safe inside yourself, that is worth infinitely
Mhm.
more than these things that you're chasing in the outside world. So feeling safe is, I think, one of the core concepts. And
Mhm.
then I think the foundational core concept, as cheesy and as vague as it might sound, is unconditional self-love. And I say that because when you truly understand what those words mean at their fullest, then that on its own can provide you the roadmap to all of the healing that you need. Because unconditional self love means no longer betraying yourself. It means no longer putting yourself down. It means no longer avoiding the uncomfortable things inside of you. It also means being kind to other people because it is impossible to be cruel to others while truly loving yourself. It means everything under the sun of emotional health. Unconditional self-love encompasses everything else that you could possibly need. And those are, in fact, the three words that led me down my healing journey. That was my North Star. If it goes against unconditional self-love, then it is problematic. You're putting on the emotional calories. Keeping in mind, and I do need to reiterate this, I just said it once, but I'm going to say it again, that unconditional self-love does not mean being selfish. It just means making sure it's like on an airplane, you put on your oxygen mask first before taking care of others,
Mhm.
because if you don't take care of yourself first, then you have nothing to give to others. So if we go with the foundational rule of you need to give to others, then you end up martyring yourself and you have no energy and you have no strength and you have no self-love and you have no courage and you have nothing left to give to others. So make
Mhm.
sure that you're okay. But part of making sure that you're okay is taking care of others because we are naturally empathic creatures, and selfishness also goes against unconditional self-love.
Mhm.
You just have to have the right balance.
Yes. Oh my gosh, those are so great. Love it. All right, Benji, why don't you tell everyone about the programs that you offer and how the audience can work with you and where they can connect to you?
Okay. So for those who want to just kind of dip their feet in, I do have a couple of books out. The first one that people I think would want to start with is called Feelings First Shadow Work, a simple approach to self-love and emotional mastery. And in that, I'm going to go over the foundational concepts, just basically go into a lot more depth about some of the concepts that we talked about here, about why analyzing your pain and your emotions isn't going to get you to where you want to go, why journaling is often done in an ineffective way because we're using too much of our analysis on what's going on, and we'll kind of outline the approach that I use for people and, start giving you it's really just making sure that people don't get lost in this over analysis. So that's a good place to
Mhm.
dip your toe in. And for the people who really want to dive into this healing, if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar, borderline, if you are aware that your life is being held back, if these are debilitating problems and
Mhm.
you are sick and tired of dealing with these, then you can reach out to me for coaching. And the way my coaching works is there's a course on the one hand where you're going to learn the tools and the skills and the exercises. And week by week, you're going to learn more about how these subconscious patterns developed. And every week, you're going to get specific tools and skills of how to start overcoming them bit by bit, step by step. And the idea is we're building a full toolbox so that by the
Mhm.
end of your first run through of the program, there is nothing that this world can throw at you that you don't know how to turn into a healing experience. And along with the course, you'll get coaching with me either in a group setting or in direct setting, depending on, how it is that you want to do this. And I actually even offer a guarantee when I work with people. I do this so that people can feel fully comfortable jumping in with both feet. That
Mhm.
if we work together, if you show up and do the work, then I'm willing to guarantee you that 8 to 12 weeks from now, you will see a massive shift that decades of therapy haven't gotten you. And if not, I don't want anything from you. So for people who want to dive into that full process,
Mhm.
they can go to my website, benjysherercoaching.com. You'll learn a little bit more about me and about the process, and you can schedule a call to talk with me and see if this is right for you.
Mhm.
Or one other option, there is a free webinar that I have that explains a little bit more about this healing process. I call it Healing Feelings First. And you can go and watch that at benjysherercoaching.com/replay.
Nice. And we will drop all those links in the show notes as well. All right, Benji, fantastic. That was so great. Thank you so much for all of that information. And just like I said, you were dropping some good nuggets here, okay?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
All
Kara.
right. What we're going to do now is go into three things with Benji. I'm going to ask you three questions that helps our audience get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is a two-parter, I should say. How do you start and end the day?
Okay. So while I will admit that I'm not perfect in this, I have good days and I have bad days where I follow this and where I don't. I really think the first 10 to 15 minutes of your day are absolutely crucial. It's when your mind is still in this in-between state between being asleep and being awake. And it's where your mind is very programmable. So I do my best to, within the first 15 minutes of the day, firstly, make sure that the first thoughts out of my mind are positive, gratitude, thinking about the day, whatever. And then get out of bed, accomplish a task. It can be something as simple as making your bed or putting away dishes from the night before, putting away your clothes, and try and get a bit of movement. Drink a glass of water right away because that gets your metabolism up and running after 6 to 8 hours or so of being asleep. And yeah, try and get a bit of movement or a bit of positivity in there. That's how I
Mhm,
try and start my days. Maybe it's gratitude journal or brag book or something like that. Or maybe it's
mhm,
just a bit of movement or listening to affirmations or listening to a morning rampage kind of thing, something like
mhm,
that. And then I will be
mhm,
fully honest with you that how I end my day, I have trouble I have trouble getting to sleep at regular hours, so I don't have a
mhm.
great sleep routine. That's just that's just
Hey,
part of the real me,
that
you
is
know.
just real. I mean, I have that same issue every night. Every time, every night, I'm like, gonna go to bed on time. And then the next thing you know, it's like 1 o'clock every, so it's a repeat performance. All right. Number two, what's a goal or an intention that you've set for yourself this year?
This year, I think so. One of my goals is to get my course into a university. So maybe not necessarily as like a 4 credit course,
Mhm.
but I actually want to give just the course itself. As I said before, like if people are signing up with me, they get the course on the one hand, they get the coaching with it. And I do very much believe that the coaching is very important with it. But for the people who are super committed, the course itself has so much amazing stuff in it. One of my goals is to make that course available for free to students in at least one university so that I can increase my impact. Like right now, I get to help, let's say 5 to 10 clients at a time per month. But if
Mhm.
I could be impacting hundreds or thousands of young students, giving them the emotional tools and skills that they
Mhm.
need to start
Mhm.
really setting themselves up for a successful future, then that would be immensely meaningful to me to just increase my impact in that way. And I really believe, like most of my clients are from 30 to 80 years old. These are
Mhm.
people learning this stuff much later in life. But if
Mhm.
someone learns this stuff at 18 or 20 years old,
Yes.
then my God, it will set you up for success in every area of your life.
Mhm.
Healthy relationships, better drive and motivation, more willingness to express yourself and chase down your goals, more willingness to demand your value for the things that you
Mhm.
do, more confidence to step up and say things that maybe go against the grain. That if we can impact 18 to 20-year-olds and give them these tools and skills, then it sets up a generation that is more
Yes.
ready to fight for the changes that this world desperately needs right now.
Yes, I absolutely love that idea. Think that's so great because you're so right. So many of us are just coming to, coaching therapy so later, like later in life. And man, I just think about like if I had the tools that I have now when I was just graduating from high school, like how different, life could be. But hey, you live and you learn. I've learned those
Yeah.
things now, but I love that you want to impact future generations. All right. And the last question is what's a book, a show, a podcast, or just anything? What's inspiring Benji in this moment?
In this moment, I don't think that I can necessarily. I don't think there's anything in particular that I can point to right now. So
Hmm.
I'm just going to point to, I guess, one of my favorite books ever. This is completely out of left field, but I love The
Hmm.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's just a
Hmm.
very playful, comical kind of
Hmm.
look at the universe. It has nothing to do with anything that we've been talking about. It's just my favorite book out there
That's what it's
that I think
about.
is very enjoyable. So, yeah. I
Yeah,
would point people in that direction.
I like it. All right. And so I want to thank you again for your time and for sharing with the community today. But before I let you go, I have to ask you one more question. What are three things you'd like the audience to take away from our conversation today?
So I think number one is this idea of emotional calories and an emotional calorie deficit. Start looking at your emotional body very much like your physical body in the sense of every emotion that you experience carries with it a certain amount of energy. Just like you eat an apple, that has a certain amount of calories. You eat a piece of cake, that has a certain amount of calories. And if you eat an apple and then you go and work out immediately, then you expend those calories immediately. Your body immediately turns those carbs into energy. You get rid of it immediately. And the
Mhm.
same is happening with our emotions. When you have an emotional experience, if you purge and process it immediately, you get rid of those emotional calories. You don't hold on to them. But if you don't, then you hold on to them and they're there. And the more emotional calories that you put on, the harder and harder it gets. Because when you're 500 pounds, it becomes a little harder to even start the exercise routine that you
Mhm.
need to be doing it. So understand this idea of emotional calories that we're constantly putting on. Number two, start understanding this cycle that's going on between your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations. Around and around and around we go. Like, yes, you've
Mhm.
probably heard people talk about how your thoughts impact your emotions. And while there's some truth to that, it's actually much more true that your emotions impact your thoughts. And much more so, then there's the overall cycle thoughts, emotions, sensations, all of them. It's very important that you start understanding those three separate elements of your experience and start noticing how your emotions are manipulating your thoughts, how your thoughts are creating a stress response in your body, how that stress response in your body is creating more thoughts and more emotions. Start paying attention to that. And I guess number three is fear versus unconditional self love, because that's what's at the core of all of this. We've been living our lives in fear. Your body still thinks that you're in danger because of all of the times that it never got the opportunity to process its emotions. And every time it tries to remind you, hey, by the way, here I am, you still, it's asking you, are you safe? Are you ready to deal with me? And some part of you goes, no, 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 I'm still not safe. And when we
Mhm.
can learn how to ditch the fear, how we can learn to feel safe and develop the unconditional self love that we're going for, then the rest of the healing just happens naturally.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, Benji, it has been a pleasure having this discussion with you, and you can always come back to see us in the future.
It would be my pleasure, Kyra. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Stay tuned, everyone. I'll be right back.